Emo.
What up, my boy? How you doing?
Good, man. Great to have you.
Good to see you again, man. I haven't seen you in a couple of days.
It's been. I started off 2024 right, seeing lots of emo.
Yo,
It's good to see you,
my guy.
man. Well, listen, man. This is actually an opportunity, selfishly for me, to get to know you a little bit better because every time we've run into each other at gigs, I've always really enjoyed your presence. You know what it's like on the comedy scene. Sometimes in a green room, you're like, what's the vibes going to be? But every time you walk in, I always breathe a sigh of relief. I'm like, all right, it's going to be. There's going to be heaps of swag back here. There's going to be good vibes and good banter and some deep chats as well. We had some great deep chats on the New Year's Eve gig.
I feel like the green room is like it's the classroom pretty much. Like you get to meet your peer mates, or your peers, and get to figure out what they're about, and then shortly after you get to see them perform, and then it kind of matches their personality, right? So yeah.
Well, from our chats as well, and watching you on stage, I mean, I've only been in the scene for the last 3 years, and you started a little bit before me, but I mean, you operate and speak with just the wisdom and sort of composure of a seasoned vet, man, you know, and I want to know about your journey because I don't know a lot about it.
Okay. I had my first open mic back in 2016, but then I didn't really do anything for comedy until 2018.
Yes.
Where I won Raw.
Absolutely, you did.
Went to Melbourne, competed nationally, and when I came back, I kind of knew that this is what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was like, all right, let's figure it out. That's 2018 is where my journey started. So
the journey started there, but I mean, I want to take it back even before because I know that you were born in Ethiopia. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
it's Sudanese parents, and
So I'm actually Sudanese, but there was a war in my country. My family fled from Sudan to Ethiopia. Yes. I was born there. A war broke out in Ethiopia. We fled to Kenya, and luckily, we were sponsored and brought over to Australia. And I call this place home now.
And that was 1996. You guys arrived in Perth?
Yeah, 1996. Yeah, Perth was the first place that they brought us, and we've been here ever since.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. Yeah. And what was it like through your journey to come eventually over to be like, you know what, I'm going to turn some of this crazy story and just my life experiences into stand-up in comedy? What was your early influences? Do you remember the first time you remember seeing stand-up comedy?
So for as long as I can remember, I've always been about like stuff that were funny anyway. So I used to love sitcoms. Then I watched the Kings of Comedy, which exposed me to like a broader audience. But I never saw stand-up as something that I could do. It was always something someone else could do. But because I had that class clown in me, eventually when 2018 would come and Joe would ask me to do a split bill with him for Fringe.
This is Joe White, Perth.
Yeah, Joe's the one that got me into comedy. So matter of fact, 2016 when I did my first open mic, he's the one that pushed me to doing that. And so it's attributed to Joe. But I just hit the ground running and just made sure that I stayed consistent, stayed true, and stayed active. So
you win Raw 2018. You go over to Melbourne, doing your first TV gigs. I mean, it's so crazy, so fast to the exposure. But you get the encouragement. You come back, and then what happens then? You start doing your pro rooms. You start working on your material. Like, how does that go from there?
Well, once you're put in front of an audience of 2,500 or 3,000. As your first initial introduction to comedy.
So crazy.
Like I started to set that as the standard. I'm like, this is what I'm going to be doing. Like, these people that are here to see us 11 or 12 people are going to be here to see me in future. So, so like that work ethic just comes between knowing that time is limited and ensuring that you, in order to kick goals and achieve, you gotta work. Just like any job, you gotta work. So like I stay working. So.
And in the early stages of you getting up on stage and doing your jokes, I mean, stylistically, were you trying to emulate anyone that you'd looked up to? Were you just telling stories from your life? Was it one-liners? What was it?
Yeah. So when I first started, like Chris Rock was a big influence as well. Like I used to pace up and down a lot when I first started doing comedy. One, it was because of nervousness.
Of course.
But two, it was because if I paced it, it was some sort of rhythm for me. So like you know when you got some sort of rhythm going on, like it kind of flows and it goes with it. So like I didn't lose my place because I was like just constantly pacing up and down. And then when I would stop, that's when that, oh, you know what I mean? Type of thing. So I always just kept myself moving.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was always, I was a fast talker as well. And eventually, between like speaking fast and like being nervous, I've eventually slowed myself down to the point where I've got my hand in my pocket now, or I'm picking up a fry from the front row. and
being loose, being free.
Yeah, being loose and being free. Yeah. So, which is just, it's just like just a development stage of like kind of discovering your spot on that stage, which generally comes after you've there's finding your voice, like when you first start comedy.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Speaking of fries.
Hey, that was quick.
Yeah.
I pick a fry off and then boom, they're here.
Talk about manifesting, right?
Yeah,
there.
you're a star, Emo. I've never seen that kind of service.
I manifested some fries, bro.
I pay, I'm a bit hungry, I have a fry, boom, they're here.
Yeah. Oh, some chicken would be good.
Yeah. The touch of a beautiful woman sometimes I go for on the front row myself. No, nothing. All right, cool. We didn't want your body to go into shock.
They got some good fries up here in Comedy Lounge as well.
They absolutely do. So when you started developing your style, I like what you're saying about, you get more comfortable. The early tropes, obviously, when you're nervous and you're starting up, the pace is high because you kind of don't want to let the moment in and be like, I'm on stage performing right now. But do you remember any early memories when you realized, I can do this, I can slow down and I don't need to rush through that? Was there any gigs in particular that you felt that?
Yo, so when I first started, first and foremost, I used to have like massive anxiety. Like I'm fidgety. You got your toilet. You got a toilet before you perform. Like that was like a ritual. Like you got my headphones on, like you fidgety, like you feel sick to your stomach. Right up until they call your name, and as soon as you touch that microphone and get your first jerk off, it was like a release. And then once you try to hone in on that, like just to have that release before you actually come onto the stage, then you can begin to enjoy it, because before then, like you're really, really dreading the gig.
Yes.
But then you're happy after the gig.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to enjoy the whole full process. Like I enjoy, like I have a whole process. Like I enjoy when I leave my house, got my comedy bag, walking to the train station, listening to some music, just like set myself a mood per se. Like, because if I'm racing to a gig, I tend to come and perform fast.
You bring that energy with you.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I'm like, but then if I'm coming in chilled, then that's the standard that I've set for myself, and I just like setting that as the tone. Eventually, like that's where you get that stage presence now, because I give myself plenty of time before I actually get called up on stage. I'm here half an hour early, just like you would with any with any like professional job. I mean,
yeah.
So like I just make sure that I'm here on time, and give myself plenty of things to work with. Like sitting in the back plays a big game as well. Like there's nothing worse than coming in 5 minutes before you're supposed to perform. If the show starts at 7, you should be here at 6:30. One, because you want to watch the full show. You want to watch the people come in. You can peep who's sitting where. You can you instead of leaving the house with the material that you've got in your head, let the material be determined based on the audience. You know what I mean?
It seems like you have an awareness and like this love of understanding the craft. Number one, identifying what good stand-up comedy and a good stand-up comedian does.
I'm trying.
And developing that and building that. Because I remember you spoke to me recently and you said that, a big fear of yours was crowd work.
Yeah. And
then you've really honed in on it and you've gone. And now, I mean, if anyone watches you, has the pleasure of watching you on stage, they would think that you were a crowd work comic from the jump.
No, that was 8 months. I think it was like 9 months ago. I was like, this year's focus is crowd work, because there's nothing worse than when someone is like, and then the chips and the potatoes, and you're like, oh, what? Okay. And then you don't address it, because then that makes you an amateur. You know what I mean? But if you can address, if you can address it and be like, hey, who said that? And like find out a little bit about themselves. And
find out about the chips. What's wrong with the chips?
Yeah, exactly. Like you're fishing in for that information, and then that is more of an organic show rather than something that's robotic, where you're just like, yep, and then jerk too. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
So like I try to come up here and identify who's in front of me, and then I can kind of see like, all right, cool guy with the tattoos. Let me do my tattoo bit, but let me chat with him real quick and get to establish a rapport, or lady in a wheelchair. Like, I mean, like you try to establish.
Avoid that area, yes, of course. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, nah, like I like standing on the edge, so like I try not to shy away from that as well. I'm all inclusive. I'm all inclusive.
Yes, you are.
Anybody can get it.
Anybody can get it anytime.
Yeah.
I love that, Emo.
Yeah.
And I feel sometimes when I watch comedians, the one thing I'm kind of looking for is connection. The ability that any comic has, irrespective of style, to connect with an audience in their own way.
Exactly.
You know? And there's so many ways to do that, but I see that with you, and I love that. Was that something that you... Is that something that you enjoy doing? Is connecting with your audience?
Oh,
more so than maybe getting a laugh.
110%, man. Like, I've always been a people's person. Like, I enjoy chatting to people long before comedy. Like, if I'm walking down the street and I see a random person, like especially a black guy, if we're walking like the same street, like we'll cross the street to say hi to each other. Like if I'm at a shopping mall and like I'm trying to say hi to everybody. Like, you know what I mean? I think the power of a smile can get you a long way, and through that, a lot of communication has happened with that as well. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, so, like I'm constantly talking to people after shows. I'm at the back, shaking their hands, thanking them for coming out. Whether it's my show or if I was on a showcase, Fringe, I stay back like 30 minutes, 40 minutes after my show. Like I'm out there thanking everyone for coming out. So yeah, it's about a connection. Like
the power of the smile, the power of your smile. I mean, some smiles might not carry as much power. A toothless Midland smile might carry a little bit less power than yours. But I hear what you're saying, man, and I do like that. And I think that now that you're setting these goals for yourself, like you had the goal of developing the crowd work, and now that's just another tool in the tool belt. What's something else now that you're looking at setting your eyes on?
What I'm setting my eyes on, like trying to cross over into different nationalities. So
you mean connect with different nationalities? You're not going to come out as an Irishman?
No. So
because I would love to see that.
So last year I went and toured in Canada and the US, and I had an absolute blast. We did some shows out in Chicago, Pittsburgh. I've done shows in New York. I did all of Canada, Ottawa, Toronto, and Montreal, and it was absolutely amazing. But if I can start figuring out how to do accents, like for example, I was in Canada and then the Canadian guy was like, "Oh, I'm from Canada, eh?" You know what I mean? Like if I could start doing accents,
we're getting there. It's beautiful.
or like a US one or like a Mississippi one. I think that will drive to a better performance. So accents would definitely be a good one for me, and I want to be able to incorporate music into my stand-up as well. So
oh wow, okay, great.
So, like where you can like break down like what's in certain songs, like my boy Jamie Patterson had one where he broke down Still Dre. It was like got jet skis, and he's like, you live in California, what do you need jet ski?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Just adding more tools and figuring out how you can connect with different audiences.
Yeah, exactly.
Despite different backgrounds. I mean, that's a beautiful thing about stand-up, right? Is you come in and everyone has their perceptions.
100%.
We're different. We live totally different lives.
Yeah.
And then hopefully from a great show, you walk away and people from totally different nationalities, different genders, different lived experiences.
Yeah, dude.
You go, oh, we're all the same, actually. Holy shit!
And that's what I found from like touring the world. You know what I mean? Like I was in South Africa this year, and I connected with the South Africans not only because I'm of African descent, but because I did my homework on South Africa. So like we went into Soweto where Nelson Mandela grew up. We went to the ghettos. One of our boys, Nicholas Goliath, took me to like a black barbershop, like just connecting with the locals and being able, like finding out what the local slang was, or this is offensive, don't say that, and finding out that there's a power outage every 4 hours in South Africa.
Beautiful.
Like, that's just information that I got to use on stage. I mean, so it made it authentic.
Yes.
When I went on the big stage for JFL in Johannesburg. So
you're doing the work. You're doing the work to make sure that you have as much ammunition as you can to connect with them.
You got to, yeah. It's a part of the job, right? Because we report what's happening in our everyday life, right? So if something's happening in Ukraine, we report our take on it. Something's happening in America, we're always quick onto the next story, right? So like you as a aspiring comedian, like you watch how the greats do it. As soon as something happened in Afghanistan. Everyone's coming up with the Afghanistan jokes. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even about the fact that you're making fun of. It's because it's your way of delivering it for people to consume what is real, and in a way where it's you know, when you listen to Sky News, it's like robotic.
Yes, of course.
But then if you could watch it on a YouTube clip and like straight away after hearing it from a comedian, you go straight to Google and find out and see, like, try to fact check it.
I see what you're saying. I've never thought of that. Yeah, you need like almost like a human connection to whatever the big scary issue is going on in the world.
So as soon as
something that's more palatable, and then you can go research.
So someone finds out that there was a gas leak in Durban, and they make a joke about it. As soon as they've watched that clip, what they're doing is they're going on YouTube or Google and trying to find out about this gas leak. You know what I mean? Like, especially if it was something that was of significance.
Yes.
And which is how I came up with my Ukrainian joke when that happened.
Right.
To raise awareness about it, but I put it into a way that people could stomach. You know what I mean? So
of course, yeah.
And that was one of my favorite jokes doing at the time too. So
that's great, man. And I wanted to bring up, I mean, we would be remiss to not acknowledge in 2022, which is now 2 years ago.
Yep.
You took your run on Australia's Got Talent all the way
to the finals.
The finals, my friend. Now tell me about that experience, and tell me about like what motivated you to sort of go into that world, because it's different to being in a comedy club. I can only imagine.
It is.
What was that process like, and how did you find the whole journey?
It was very different, man. Like, to be honest, I didn't want to do that TV show. I'm going to give that a skip. He goes, oh, why not? I said, my management said comedians never win. And that was the end of that conversation. I think it was like a week or something later. He calls me up. He's like, hey, Emo, check this out. He sent me, it's like a comedian had won the British Got Talent.
Okay, yeah.
Axel Blake, that just previously.
Yeah, wow, okay.
And that's all I needed to hear, man. I was like,
yes, sir.
Yeah, so
was the producers trying to shut you up about the ins and outs of Australia's Got Talent.
Yeah, Channel 7's got some. They got power. they got power.
They got shooters. But yeah, so walk me through it. Sorry.
So when he had, like, if you can prove to me that I got a fair shake, I have no reason of why that I wouldn't do anything that's comedy based. And he told me that comedians can win. He showed me evidence of a previous winner in Britain, so that means that it was possible. As soon as he proved that to me, I said, "Giddy up, let's do it."
Wow.
And he was like, "Hey, you're gonna have to send me your transcript of what you want to do. Just keep in mind, you're gonna be doing an audition. If you make it through the audition, you get into the semis. If you get through the semis, you get into the finals. I'm only telling you this because you don't want to use all your best stuff."
Yes, of course.
Just for the audition.
Yep.
But you also want to use good enough stuff to make sure you get through, so you can still keep some for the finals.
Yeah.
I said, don't worry about it, man. I sent him my whole transcript of auditions, semis, and finals. He goes,
just filthy sex stuff, no doubt, full of swearing.
I was like, here you go. You can have it all. He just wanted the audition stuff.
Yep.
So you can have it all. And for the finals, they said, this is how we're going to win. And he was like, all right, cool. That sounds great. And I went did the auditions, and like, honestly, man, like, I got the golden buzzer. I was like, yeah. I knew in my heart of all hearts, like, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna win this. Like, I was that sure that I was gonna win. You know what I mean? Because they loved me out there. Like, I did the semis. They loved me there as well. Yeah. I did the finals, and it was in Australia's hands. The finals probably could have been better, but like, I'm proud of how far I've gotten. Especially considering that no comedians ever made it that far. So,
no, and it was, I think, man, look, speaking from, like, you know, the Perth comedy scene, most comedians can be bitter, angry, jealous creatures. But what was lovely is that watching you do it, I think there was, you know, from what the circles that I was speaking to, everyone was super stoked. Everyone was super supportive.
Everyone was very supportive, man.
Yeah.
When I was running into them at gigs, everyone gave me my kudos. Like, honestly, man, like, we have such a strong scene here in WA, and it's slept on, man. You're starting to see more people gravitating to Perth now for comedy, because beforehand you'd have to go to Melbourne and Sydney, but now WA is kind of getting its recognition that is due, and it's not attributed to me, but like I'm saying, like, because of clubs like this here, and other small entrepreneurs opening their own rooms as well, we've actually been able to get to the point where we've got enough stage time so people like myself can make it to the finals of Australia's Got Talent.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Which is extremely important. The stage time, the reps, putting in
Yeah,
the work.
exactly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, look, man. I mean, it's been a beautiful journey to watch, even in the short years that I've known you.
Yeah.
And you still keep going on. You're touring international now. You got a new show coming out.
Yeah.
African Aussie. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about it.
Yeah, African Aussie is just pretty much my biography.
Yeah.
It explains how I came to be here in Australia. What the journey was from being born in a refugee camp to moving to a second refugee camp to coming to Australia with the culture clash, not knowing English, learning everything from scratch, school, eventually getting into the workforce, having kids, being engaged at one stage, and to eventually finding my calling in stand-up comedy. So
That sounds beautiful,
and
man.
then it brings you to present day to how I'm on this stage right now. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. And is that running all through Fringe? Is there any dates? Where can people get tickets for
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So at the Fringe Festival, first show is January 31st. I'm only doing 7 shows, so like it's limited tickets, and they're moving pretty well as well. So yeah, like it's just on Fringe, or you can just add me on Instagram, Emo Majok. It'll be in my link tree. So yeah, on all social media anyway. Like,
awesome, man. Well, hopefully everyone goes and checks out African Aussie. It's always a pleasure to see you at gigs, man.
Yo.
It's good to get to know you a little bit more as well.
Likewise, brother.
I
honestly.
look forward to it more, my man.
Yo,
Thank you.
Legend.
Emo Majok, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Blake. Woo.